Welcome to the Unseen. I am Zach, and this is my wife again.
Gina.
Yes, so last week we talked about... Yes, that is your name.
Thanks for having me back.
Last week we talked about kind of just general spirit awareness around the holidays. So we were just talking about how, you have your family gatherings or friends stuff, and there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of things on the schedule. And to practice, because it can be stressful and there's a lot of different people bringing all their stuff into a room. And
so we decided to do part 2 because so many people said it was really helpful. And it was good for us to reminding ourselves of what's actually going on and what we can do to actually help everyone. So today's part 2.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about this every single week until it stops being helpful. Just kidding. So really the focus of last time was kind of being aware of the atmosphere.
Okay, pause. If you have specific questions and you want to see me back, post them and you might get me to come back on. Maybe. But no, for real. If you have questions about any of the stuff that we're talking about and you want us to talk about it next time, we can probably do that.
Yeah. Questions are very helpful because sometimes we're talking about things that we don't realize other people don't necessarily know what we mean, because some of it we're so used to and so used to hearing about, but other people are not, which is okay. So we can explain that stuff. So feel free to ask literally about anything. Even if you just want to know more about us personally. We probably won't make a video about about that, but we can answer you. So we largely focused on atmospheres. So just to give a quick little recap of that, everyone carries, you have your spirit, your body, everything. And what you are carrying with you creates an atmosphere. So you would experience this if you walk into someone's home and it just feels peaceful, or maybe you walk into a room and it just feels like there's a lot of tension. That's the atmosphere, okay? So everyone's familiar with this, even if you might use different language for it, but we're all familiar with what that feels like in different ways. So our focus was in the holidays, you have all these people gathering usually, and they're bringing their own stuff. They might have a different lifestyle, and so they're carrying all kinds of different stuff. Maybe you have family members that aren't saved, so that's a whole nother thing. There's higher stress. There's usually just a lot more going on. And in some cases, you have families that they have a lot more icky stuff going on, just based on what might be normal. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean depending on what they allow, in their life. So it was about recognizing that and how you don't have to be a victim to that, and recognizing that what you are sensing or the way you start feeling doesn't mean that it's automatically you and yours. It just might mean that you're picking up on stuff, and how to begin to really train yourself to recognize what's yours, what's not yours, and kind of how to deal with that. Do you want to say anything? Yeah. So that was last week. If you want to hear more in depth about that, go watch the previous video. So this, we kind of want to add more of a fuller picture to that. We're not to talk too in depth about any specific thing, but so that was more the spirit side. And there is more to what is going on in the unseen, because that's what this channel is really all about. Or the show, or whatever you call this. It's not a channel. Series. It's all about the spirit realm. But on the other side of that, our spirit, our body, our soul, so the mind, the will, the emotions, that whole side of it, and your physical body, they're all connected. None of them are separate from each other, where you can just all focus on the spirit and completely ignore what's going on physically. They affect each other. Oftentimes what's going on in one is going on in the other. It just might be manifesting a little different. But so we kind of wanted to draw more of a full picture of how they all actually work together and there's more to it than just paying attention to, you know, the atmosphere stuff, because while that's important and usually not well understood unless you take the time to learn and practice that kind of thing, there is the other stuff too, which we believe is very important, and we've walked through a lot of this kind of stuff. Do you want to talk about that?
Start it out. What do you want me to talk about?
Well, one, this is just this might even be laughably simple, but I feel like it's worth bringing up. So we have children, we have 4 kids, and early on in our marriage, before we had kids, we just did all the different like family scheduled things, which we liked. It was all good. There were sometimes some things over the years that we began to say no to because it could just become too much, because you have your immediate family and then the extended family, depending on who's connected and who's doing what. And it could just be a lot, and you know, it could be very draining, and we don't like that. We're more homebody people in general.
Yes, we are more introverted and homebody, but the way I grew up, we went to everything. We stayed up late, we did all the parties with all the people, and
which there's nothing wrong
there's
with.
nothing wrong with that. I actually still enjoy doing those things, but once we had kids, we quickly realized to do what we were doing and to like do that every year
and to enjoy life,
we have to make changes and actually be intentional with what we want to do and what we don't want to do. And so for a couple of years there was a lot of frustration, a lot of stress. And
before we made the changes.
Right. Before we made the changes, it was like, just get through the holidays is basically how it felt. And so there was really, for a while, there was no intention to what we were doing. It was just, we were doing it to get through it. This is what was happening, and
it wasn't very fun.
It wasn't very fun.
Not fun.
So there is that part to the holidays that we want to talk about just for a minute, is being intentional with what you say yes to and what you say no to. You don't have to do everything, and that might be like a wow moment for some of you, but you really don't. You can have a powerful yes and a powerful no, and just recognizing, like, especially if you have kids, the more you're doing, the more that they're like being like stimulated, the more things they're going to like in the natural, that creates tired kids. But what it also does is it makes you more, I want to say like susceptible. Is there a better word for that?
Like open?
More open for the negative things. Like when I'm tired, I am more likely to be like super impatient and angry and like all of those things that normally, if I have peace and I feel like what I'm saying yes to is what I want to say yes to, and I'm making space and my kids have space, there's a peaceful home. But if I'm just constantly like, we're going, we have all these things to do, in the natural, like you feel it physically and you feel tired and exhausted, but it also in the spirit, there's things happening as well. So what happens in the natural does affect what happens in the spirit.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Oh, thanks.
That's impressive. Yeah, so like to kind of play further into the example Gina just gave, and this would be true for me too in other ways, I just can't think of a very good way to explain it. So like in the family context of all that, like, so Gina, maybe you could talk more into this since it's you, but like you're a feeler. Like, so when it comes to the atmosphere, I can more easily, I'm aware of things and I pick up on stuff, but I'm less of what people might call a feeler, where I can just also be very unaware. Like I can kind of shut that down and just be unaware of all the stuff, if I want to. Gina's more of a feeler where that's not so much of an option for you. So on the point of what she was saying, like when you're tired, you're drained, there's that just higher level of stress, all the stuff going on, you're more susceptible to receiving that stuff and even taking it on as your own. So when you're talking about the atmosphere and the stuff going on in the spirit, the unseen, then it's almost like your defenses are lowered. And not that it's about defenses like protecting yourself, but and you probably all know this, like when you're more tired, your body is more susceptible to sickness, just in the natural. So in the same way in the spirit, when you're drained, you're not in a good place, like mentally, that whole thing, like your spirit's more open to, if you want to say, attacks. In the same way your body is more open to attack, and less able to handle it. Now, what we're not saying, depending on what you believe on this stuff, we're not saying that being tired on the holidays means you're going to get possessed. Nothing so extreme. That's not really the point. It's just about how actually all of these things play into each other, and none of them are separate.
And even, so I think we mentioned this in the last video, but basically we're all just like big kids. So when it comes to like the emotional side, like you've seen like toddlers, maybe you've had toddlers or you have them. Like we have them, and when they're tired, there's literally nothing you can do except put them to bed that is going to make the situation better. Like they're not able to regulate what's going on. It could make no sense, but they can't regulate themselves because of how tired they are or hungry, same thing. And really we are the same way. When we get tired, when we're hungry, when we're like out of our norm, it is so hard to regulate yourself because you're not in that space that you're used to. Like, especially if you have a really good rhythm, whether it's spending time with the Lord or like you have a really good routine at home, when you're out of that rhythm, it kind of disrupts things a little bit. And that doesn't mean that you can't have peace and you can't stay in that place, but it does mean that it's going to be a little harder to maintain peace, especially if you're unaware of what's going on and you're just letting things happen to you.
Yeah. Okay. Just for a second, maybe Travis, you can edit that part out. But if not, wasn't sure if we were recording, and I was like, hold on. We are. Yes, that was good. I'm sorry for the distraction.
It's okay.
Yeah, and I'm sure all of us are very aware of how we connect with what she just said. Like, we've all at times been irrationally upset over things that just aren't worth it, aren't even really a big deal, but because of, being drained and in that way, or in stressful environments, we get like, we blow up over things that we would never normally blow up over. So again, this might be like almost like duh to some of you, like, of course this makes sense, but actually learning to pay attention to all of the things, because it's not about like keeping yourself in this perfect state of equilibrium. That's impossible. There are times you have to do more, and so you will be more tired, and you can't avoid that. That's just a part of life at times. But it's about recognizing what's going on so you can better pay attention. For kids, like something we're big on, maybe you're not big on this, and I'm not going to go deep in this, but like, especially with kids, but it's also true for us. The holidays, there's usually a lot more sugar. There's a lot of food that's just not in our normal diet, a lot of sugar. And I'm guilty of partaking quite a bit, but I've gotten better. But like, so we allow the kids to have stuff, like, we're not like hardcore about it, like they can't have anything. But we easily recognize the moment they start having more than what's kind of the norm, and we're tired, we're doing a lot more.
And you're getting presents. There's so much going on during a holiday.
Oh, that's, that was good. That reminded me of something.
Okay.
We'll go to that next. But like, so sugar, like, so it's the doing stuff, the being tired, the diet, like the things physically actually affect you. Now, that's not to say that being tired or eating not great makes your spirit man like unhealthy. I'm not saying it's so direct as that, but in the same way that there's the stuff going on in the unseen, there's the stuff going on physically. So again, wrapping this all in, that everything that you do, what you feed on, both mentally, physically, and spiritually, it affects things, and you can learn to recognize what's not working, and you can actually be a powerful person and adjust. And sometimes that is saying no to stuff or saying yes to other things. Sometimes that's actually moderating what you or your family or children are eating. I mean, that sounds like crazy, like to be that hard. And it's not about having like a lot of strict rules, but it's just
It's just about being aware.
Yeah, being aware.
It's about being aware. What were you going to say about the presents?
Okay, so we'll wrap this up in a minute. How do you know it was the presents? That was good. Okay, so presents. Something that we've talked quite a bit about in the past, like with our Christmas time. So don't know what your normal is, and this isn't about like saying what's right or wrong, but paying attention to atmosphere even in your home. Because if, like, let's say you're a parent, you have children, you're in your home, either way, you're in your home. You're the gatekeeper of your home. So if you're recognizing that there's things that bring in an atmosphere or a mindset, which really affects the atmosphere, that isn't good, like you don't like what's happening, or you start to recognize you don't really like what happens after XYZ. Well, one of those things, and this is common, especially with Christmas time, is presents. Because kids, obviously, there's the side of maturity that they just have to learn. You know, every kid, they get presents, they're unhappy with it if they are, or there's just more, they want more. There's all this stuff, all the stimulation and the excitement around it, which is great. Excitement's great. Presents are great. But there can also be that side of like setting the atmosphere of like, there can almost be like a greedy thing that comes in. And not that anyone's doing that intentionally, but like presents are good, but also keeping the right mindset as you go into it. So it's like, why are we giving presents? Maybe we're doing too much of it. Like maybe cut back on the presents and like just value the time or whatever your values are. I'm not giving you like a list of rules, but like even stuff like that, it creates atmosphere. And you might recognize certain things are not actually creating the kind of feeling around that you want to cultivate in your home.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to a friend about this because with us, like I'm not going to give you the rundown of what we've decided to do with our family, but I will say that we've been very intentional with what we're giving our kids, and we're intentional in the way that we don't like when there's a bunch of just crazy attitudes and just there's a bunch of things that we just have recognized. Right. So it just happens, and that's something like you address with your kids when it does happen. Those are opportunities or adults. But the thing that we've really like put before our kids and even for us is like the purpose of Christmas is not about the gifts. Like it's not. It's being around each other. It's like there is that love, like you love someone and you want to give them a gift, and there's like that joy in there, and those are the kind of things that we want to help our kids see more of. And so that's really how we approach Christmas, which then they experience because we have set the tone already.
Yeah. So just kind of a last thought, unless you have more to add. I wouldn't know, this just kind of popped up. I wouldn't normally talk about it like this, but this might help someone listening. If you look at everything you do, not in an overly controlling way, but if you look at everything you do physically with your body, you know, the physical side, mentally and spiritually, everything is a transaction, meaning you are either sowing into or you're pulling out of, or to twist that slightly, you're either sowing into like a heaven thing, like so spiritually speaking, you're sowing into like a heaven mindset, the ways of God, that kind of thing, or you're sowing into, you know, the dark stuff, you know, the enemy, stuff that you don't want, basically. And that's true physically, spiritually, mentally. There's really, in my opinion, no gray area. There's not like a lot of stuff that's just neutral, like it's not good or bad, it just is. Now I would say there are certain things that can switch sides depending on the individual, because, well, I'm not going to get theological with it. If you want me to talk more about that, ask a question. I can talk more about that. But like everything is like a transaction. So with the holidays, with your family, with the stuff you're doing, what you are saying yes to, what you're putting your time into, the stuff you're feeding yourself, literally and spiritually, like it is a transaction. You're building something in the spirit, and all of it affects. Everything's connected. We are a whole being. It's not just your spirit man who lives in this shell of a body. This is you too. So learn to pay attention to it. Ask questions. It's friendship with the Holy Spirit. That's the biggest thing. And talking to him, asking him like what's going on, letting him show you stuff. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Same thing. Okay.
Yep. So thank you for joining us today.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you have any questions, put them below and we'll answer you or talk about it another time.
Yeah. All right. See you next time.